Hey, this is Aerodiver. I know it's been a long time since I've uploaded anything, and I'm trying to get back into things now that my job and life have kind of calmed down. So today what I'm going to do for y'all is a video where I'm just going to start to finish just draw a character's just head, just kind of like a profile, icon, headshot type of view. Um, the character I've chosen is actually kind of like a new version of my Sona. I played with the color some, and I wanted to kind of give a bit more of like color depth, so it's not just flat black and white. Now there's like more of a blue tinge to most of the colors. So starting off, I use Clip Studio Paint EX. I still use that quite a bit, and when they offer it, they have like those new update type thing. You can pay monthly for it, or if you own the base program, at least for me, they offered just buying the DLC type stuff up through a certain amount of time just as one set price. So I do have some of the newer features, stuff like that. I've not really used them a whole bunch, to be honest. I just kind of use the core program still. So I'd recommend if you're just getting into this, just get the program, see if you like it or not, and just kind of go from there. It's really important to find a program that you like, but just know any new program, it does have learning curve regardless. So starting off, what I do for a file, I'm just gonna make a new file here. Just go to File, New. This is the size canvas I like to work with. If your computer can handle it, I mean, you can always do bigger. Just know that it's easier to make a file bigger and shrink it down than it is the opposite from just my experience. I'm going to choose the background color right here. This is useful when you're drawing stuff, just kind of to save your eyes from just burning staring at a solid screen of white, as well as it just kind of helps set kind of like a pre-tone for the background. So I'm gonna actually do the opposite of what my character's colors are in general. So like I have a lot of blue colors, so the complementary color for that's gonna be orange. So just kind of like a gray orange kind of mid-tone. I think I'll go with that. Alright, hit OK. Also, just to help y'all out, the workspace layout I like to use this illustration. I may have tweaked it a little bit since then, but just in general, if you want to copy the type of layout I have, I've got just kind of like tools, brushes, effects. Then I've got some of the other tools I don't use near as much. Then I've got my just in general brush area up here. I usually just have this reflecting whatever I'm doing. Then I've got my like brush properties adjusting panel right here. My color wheel. Sometimes I have it in the square, sometimes I have it in the triangle. I don't really notice a big difference between the two for my personal use, so I just kind of flip-flop between them. Then I have my subview, navigator, item bank, information. Subview and navigator are the main two I use. Then I've got my just layers right here. I've also got an insane amount of files, just so y'all know, when it comes to my materials and brushes and stuff like that. One day I might just do a video going over the brush packs and stuff I have. As you can see over here, like I have an insane amount of folders with different brushes and all sorts of stuff. Most of these I don't use, or if I do use, it's for like very specific effects. So what I'm going to be using today is just a simple pencil brush. When it comes to sketching out something, I usually like to keep my stabilization low because I just kind of want those loose forms. And also I want kind of like a thicker brush than I would line with normally because I'm going to hone in on where I want those lines later. So how I start most headshots off, just kind of like a circle, just loose general form. Most of the characters I like to draw I give their head more of like I don't know really how to describe this shape. Kind of like a square and a circle together. So I've kind of got that square top with the circle. But I usually don't put that line right there. Also, the more I've drawn, the more I've started to try to actually erase guidelines as I go. I'm a pretty messy sketcher, so erasing these lines as I go kind of helps some. Right now what I'm doing is I'm dividing the face in half. Another thing to remember, unless the character's looking straight on at you, there's going to be some curvature to this, because it is, you know, you're trying to give that 3D perception. So there's going to be a little bit curved, just because the face does curve outward. I'm actually going to round that off a bit more. And what I like to do here is these are going to be kind of like the edges for like where the ears start. I kind of like to divide the top into 4 parts. You know, there's the edge of the head here, the start of the ear, middle of the head, start of the next ear, into the other like side of the head. I then also just go ahead and put another horizontal curve. I don't go completely in the half. I kind of lower it a bit. I like to give a lot of room for the eyes and the expression. And a lot of these subtle, like, foundational lines do vary quite a bit based on the style you're going for. So just keep that in mind. It's not like a rule. You have to do this proportionally. That's just where style comes in. Like, if you did a realistic human face, you know, the eyes are going to be very set proportion from each other. But if you're doing something more stylized, more cartoony, then you're not going to follow those rules. So here, I'm just kind of extending those lines down to kind of make a bridge with the nose. When it comes to the muzzle itself, I like to make a kind of like rounded out triangle that sticks out. And then I connect it. I'm then going to mirror this kind of same angle curve for the middle of the muzzle. And then it looks sad, but I'm going to make it smile. But there's the initial mouth. When it comes to learning these foundational lines, it is really important to use lots of references, stuff like that. Starting off drawing, you'll want to look at actual images of animals, as well as look at other people's artwork. See how they handle certain situations, see how they perceive certain angles and stuff. It never hurts to reference, and know that tracing, if you trace something to learn, that's fine, but if you post a tracing claiming it as your own, that's where it's a problem. A lot of artists tend to dogpile people that trace, and really it's more so you trace to learn and appreciate and understand. Artists have been doing that for centuries. It's just a matter of how you display that tracing. If you're really proud of a tracing, I mean, usually it's best not to post. If you do post it, just make sure you're state like, hey, this is a study. That's what most people call those, studies. You can trace study or you can reference study. I typically like to reference study because it forces me to learn more than just tracing. That's a topic for another video I'll probably go over. Also, if you hear some random noises, my cat's on the desk right now, so she's probably trying to see what I'm up to. Alright, so here I have the nose. I like to put pretty big noses on characters. I also want to mirror kind of this bottom of the eye line on the nose because I want to maintain a consistent angle. That's going to help make this kind of look more cohesively as a figure. It's kind of like the mouth. Now the eyes play a pretty important role in a character. It's usually the first thing people are going to look at. So you can just do full circles, or I like to do kind of like almost an almond shape, just kind of like this more pointy oval. I also like to then go ahead and figure out what expression I'm going to do. This is probably my most common expression I like to do. Just kind of one eyebrow, just kind of arced, just kind of mirroring the top of the eye. And the one that's just kind of following that, but it's got a little, I don't know, sass in there. I'm gonna have the mouth apart a little bit, just so I can show some teeth. This is the bottom of the chin. And I try to just kind of flow the form from the bottom of the chin over to the sides. Now when it comes to drawing like tufts of fur, it takes a lot of practice to kind of get a feel for forms. So typically it's almost like a bunch of triangles, but you're just reflecting the volume of the shape. You're not trying to depict every single individual hair. If you're trying to go super realistic, then you'd want to do more individual type strands, but even then there's a sense of trying to keep everything in a certain volume to represent. Because essentially when we're making like more cartoon looking images and stuff, the way that I've understood it is you're just trying to simplify. You're trying to reduce the information that's being presented so it's enough the viewer understands what they're seeing and it makes sense, but it doesn't have to make hardcore logical sense either. So this character is part possum, part dragon. I know the muzzle looks a bit more canine. That's a flaw of my own. I really like canine looking muzzles, even on my non-canine characters. So my main character does have a canine style muzzle, even though she's not canine. So ears can also be a really tough thing. So I know I'm going to kind of just breeze through this one. So it's a very large shape compared to the rest of the head. And then often the way I like to think about it is, you know, some of it's going to be in the front, but then also part of the ear goes behind the head, and then it comes back up to the front. So you've got, there's front, and then that's the back. You also have part of the ear covering, and then it slopes up. Part of the ear covering, and it slopes up, or slopes back more accurately. It just kind of has that, like, outline most ears do. That's going to be the corner of the head. And then I like to kind of ease that out using just some tufts of fur. And then some characters will have even more fur inside the ear. This character specifically doesn't, and instead has a piece of the ear missing, as well as some ear piercings. I'm just going to sketch those out. Now, this ear I'm probably going to angle more just because it is on the further side of the head. So yet again, this is where the ear starts. It's just kind of like a big flat plane that's rolled around the head. And especially with ears, looking at lots of references helps you kind of understand and gather the different forms and shapes they can take. There we go. Alright, now this character is also a dragon. She has horns. So I usually try to put horns right here. I am really bad about crowding the top of the head. And the way I think about horns is like, you know, they connect to there, so they're going to have kind of like a cut into the head. And then they just kind of arch outward. Try to get them around the same shape and curve and size. And then this is going to be the hairline. So thinking through the hair, it's kind of like one big shape. Also notice I don't get crazy detailed on shaping and lining some of the other stuff, because I know the hair is going to cover a good chunk. You can also use the hair to cover like parts that feel really awkward in the drawing, or things that you don't want to have to detail or flesh out. Alright. I do want to show some neckline for this. So typically a neckline I like to line up at the back and then taper off into like a triangle with some tufts of fur sticking out. I am going to go ahead and put some eyes, like finish off the eyes so it's not just a void staring at me. I like to do really large eyes, so it's kind of more like anime leaning. So I've got a really large, you can almost imagine a complete circle with another circle in it, but instead that's being cut off by the eyelids. Define the bridge of the nose a little more. Alright. That was my messy sketch. So what I like to do is, this right here is the opacity slide bar, so I'm just going to knock it down to where I can like barely see the drawing. And then that way I can make a new layer on top of it. And instead I can get a little bit closer and figure out and define some of the lines more. I am going to drop the size of my brush down some. And I don't have to follow 100% the guidelines underneath. I'm just going to try to make what I like the flow of and what I think is going to work. It is useful to try to get confident in large, long strokes. It can also be really difficult. So don't be afraid on this, kind of like I'm doing. I'm doing these short little spurts, but layering on top of the same line. And it's also right if nothing's perfect. Like, I really don't like that nose. Thankfully, this is digital, so I can just swap over to my eraser tool and just erase it. Looking back at my sub view, I can see that I want to give the character a different kind of nose. It still comes to a point towards the mouth, but it doesn't actually take up that whole, like, nose spots. There we go. The nostrils. I can also define some of, like, where I want the colors to go, because those color lines can also help define the shape. I like to make the top of the eyelid a lot bigger just because it helps the eye have a little bit more depth. It's kind of something I learned looking at a lot of anime art. So this line right here that I just put kind of mirrors this line and just kind of defining the nose where it starts. I'm actually gonna probably shrink the eyebrow a little bit just because the shape around my character's eyes specifically does define a lot of the expression by itself. It can also be nice sometimes to put that little line right there to kind of show where the eyelid stops and the rest of the face begins. It can also be useful to rotate the canvas sometimes. That's where this navigator kind of helps. Or if you have a tablet that has like preset buttons or sliders and stuff, you can also have it set to do that. My tablet actually has a spot where I can rotate the canvas, but I'm just so used to doing it on the screen that I don't really use that tool. I do usually change the fur quite a bit between sketches. Just kind of looking at this tuft right here, I just don't like how it looks. I'm not sure how to explain why I don't like it, but I'm gonna change it back to one tuft, but instead have maybe that split in there. You also just want to be careful not putting too many spikes of fur. That can make it a little too like spiky and a little overwhelming shape-wise. And also you can still see I'm being pretty loose in my marks, not really getting too picky about line width or anything. Just because this is like a more refined sketch. My character does kind of have some color variety inside the ear. I think I am going to throw a tuft of fur in just to help fill that area. I'm going to start upping my stabilization just a little bit. Help with some of these curves. Also, stabilization just helps basically smooth out the line. It kind of auto-corrects into a more straight line instead of having any type of bumps or shakes in it. Usually as I go, I decrease the opacity of the layer that's underneath it. I decrease the opaqueness so it's more transparent, just so I can see these new lines I'm putting in. Especially with this hair, because I want to ignore what's behind it. Sometimes if it's something really important that helps define like an expression or something, you can have that show through the hair, because hair is not like a solid block that you can't see through. You can usually see through it a little bit. There we go. Just kind of going through and figuring out exactly where I'm gonna have color lines. Also just double checking, I'm not forgetting stuff, like I forgot the back of the neck hair. Probably some hair showing through there. Alright. Now I can just get rid of the old layer. I can decrease this down. And now I'm just gonna go overall and just kind of look at it. It's also useful sometimes to kind of flip it upside down. At this point, like if I wanted to, I could do another draw over. The ear looks normal, the horn. This button right here is really useful because it just flips it. Sometimes you'll notice things that look kind of weird. And I don't know the science behind it, but it's like if you skew it one way and you skew it the other way, it's like it lets you see it at a different perspective. So you can kind of see proportional issues that you would like to fix or adjust. Like the eye shape was a little weird to me. I can see that I made this side of the muzzle way different shape and size than the other. My character's got some funky teeth going on, so I'm actually going to, there we go. Flip it back. It actually looks quite a bit better, eye shape wise. There we go. I think I need to get the hair to chill out some. I'm gonna break it up some more. Here we go. Bring that back. I'm gonna erase this. And I'm just gonna erase some of those lines from the layer behind, just so I don't get confused between the two things. And if my pen does something really weird, it's because my cat's trying to actively sit in my lap while I'm drawing. Okay. Alright. Gonna make those the same opacity. I'm actually gonna group them, and by group them I mean there's this little layer folder, so it's right there. And just like a file folder on your computer, you can put things in it. So I just moved those to be inside of it, so I can shut that and open it. You can see them. And that way this little eye, I can make it completely disappear, or I can adjust the opacity of them together. So I'm going to select them both. I'm going to bring that up to 100, because I'm going to collapse that. And then that way I can adjust their opacity at the same time instead of having to do both layers. Just a little bit of organization, and a little bit of time saving. So now I'm going to swap over to one of my outlining pens. I like to sketch in a different type of brush than I do for lining things. This is getting incredibly difficult as I have a cat trying to squeeze herself in a very small spot between me and my tablet. So bear with me. This is a daily struggle for me. She loves attention. And I give her lots of attention, but there's never enough attention for her. And she stepped on my mouse. Okay. I think she's settled down now. So I really don't like how that line brush works. As you can see, I have so many. Let me find, there it is. I really like this one. So typically when I'm lining stuff, I've been known to use ridiculously high stabilization. That's like, it's just kind of like a personal preference type deal. So if it's not your cup of tea, that's perfectly fine if you want more of those natural organic lines. Or if you're just really good at smooth straight lines and don't need that, that's amazing. Never be afraid to rotate the canvas to help hit a good angle. Sometimes it's just easier to do. You can see here I'm forming a line using multiple small strokes to kind of fill in what I want filled in. There we go. Also, don't be like me and forget to ever save. So I just saved real quick. I'm actually gonna do the eyes as a whole separate thing. I'm also not gonna actually line the color separations because I'm gonna do that using the same color as the separation, so it's like lineless coloring. I do have a pressure sensitive pen, I forgot to mention. So that's how I'm getting some of these really thin lines without adjusting the brush size. Oops, that was the wrong button. What I did just there was I used an eraser tool just to help taper that point on the fur to something I liked a lot better than it did. And sometimes I totally ignore my sketch line and just kind of make a new shape on the moment. Just cleaning up some of my lines as I go. Alright. I feel like I'm about to struggle with this horn a lot. There we go. I'm actually gonna put some fur right there, just kind of show that definition a bit. Those right there. It's also fun to different drawings, do different line weights for the drawing. Like sometimes I'll do a drawing like this one where I'm using a pretty heavy line. And sometimes I'll use a very light line just because I want to focus on maybe the colors and the shading instead. But I really want to do this like heavy bold line. Alright, now I'm gonna do some of these back parts, like the back horn, tip of the ear you see from the other side. I'm actually gonna cut that in more. And I do hope to in the future do some videos where I do like a headshot, but it's more of like a species focused, because I can do like species specific types of breakdowns for like how to mainly sketch the head and stuff like that. My character specifically is a hybrid of just several things that there's not like a set head shape or anything that helps convey a species. It's just a bunch of random stuff. Just as I do in real life, I like to give my character some pretty heavy eyeliner. Alright, once I'm happy with the lines, I can get rid of the sketch layer, or at least hide it, because I might need to reference some color boundaries later. Now, how I like to fill my shapes is I like to go over to my auto select wand. Just looking at my settings I have apply to connected pixels. That means if I select in here, notice it's not selecting these because it's not connected. It's almost like if every different color was like a wall. It views it almost as if this connected wall stopped the flow. It's like my cat's trying to go past the mic. Okay, so I need to select those gaps as well. I also have the close gap, so that way if I missed connecting two lines, it's just going to kind of assume I meant to connect those and still view that as like a boundary for that fill or that select. Tolerance is basically like how picky it is on what is considered a different color. Scaling mode I've just always had set to that. Refer multiple, that's basically like, is it only looking at the layer I have selected and just pretending like nothing else exists? Like if I don't do refer multiple, this is what it would see on this layer. It would see nothing on this layer. So refer multiple because I have my sketch line hidden. And then anti-aliasing, that's what it says. I have it on, just kind of help smooth it out. So I'm going to deselect that because I don't need that. I'm going to select that part because it's also the background. Then I go to select, invert. So now I've selected the entire shape, including the lines. I have a new layer I made that's got nothing on it. And I'm just going to pick a just neutral tone. And I'm just going to make a big shape, but because I've only selected the shape itself, it's going to be like that. I can then deselect. And what this does is it gives me a place that I can do this. I'm going to make a new group. Oops, I did not mean to put that in there. So this group I'm going to be using for colors. I'll just color it yellow just because I can. You can color code things. I usually don't, but for the sake of the video I am. So this yellow group I have, I'm going to make a new file. Now this is another tool. This can be kind of hard to grasp at first, but it's so helpful and useful once you do. So this is the clip to layer below. So I'm doing it for the whole folder. So everything I draw on this will only appear on this shape. So like example, if I take this bright pink line and I draw on this layer because it's in this group, which means it's also yellow. So see, it's part of this group. See, it only shows up on there. Now if I undo that, normally it'd look like that. But when it shows that little red line, that means it's gonna drop that image onto whatever is below it. So that's where it's useful. I'm gonna delete the color, because obviously I don't need that color there. And then I'm also just gonna go ahead and make a new folder and kind of do the same thing as before, except for I'm using the fill tool. To white, I'm going to go ahead and just block out the eyes, just because the eyes I usually do a whole bunch of layers on and it can easily get complicated. So the settings I'm using for the eye are pretty similar and parallel to this select tool. They kind of use the same technology. So I just filled the eyes. I'm going to make that, make blue the eye layer. Okay. So now I can take a circle tool, can select the color of the eye. Look, I can make my character go insane. There we go. One there. I'm just going to duplicate that. And then I can also do the same thing with the darker color. So when it comes to the center of the eyes, I don't like to do pitch black. I like to do just a darker version of that color. So make us another circle, but it's not as big. Move it where I want. Duplicate. Move it where I want. And I'll get back to the eyes later. For now, I'm going to work on the coloring of the character itself. So I'm going to take my line tool. And now I'm going to use the colors that I'm putting the boundaries for. There's the nose area. This is gonna be that eye shape. There's probably a term for that on a possum, because we have words for everything, but I do not know the words for everything. I'll put the spots in later. That's alright, now I can take my fill tool. Yet again, I have a pretty high close gap. Connects only to connected pixels, so it stops when it hits another color. Pretty low tolerance. Area scaling helps basically overfill a little bit, so that way there's not a weird white fuzzy boundary. So like, just for example, use a neon green, just for example. So like here, oh, it actually still did pretty good. Normally there's like a little gap, but it might be just because I use such a bright color. So yeah, you can see here that like white border. That's what that kind of helps get rid of. So if I increase it, you see it's gone. That's because it's filling an extra 2 pixels beyond what the computer thinks it should do. So now I'm just gonna select colors I need. I like to do those boundaries in that color, so I can just select that boundary. And I have a button on my pen to immediately flip to color selector. Normally it's right here. I can also just pick off of this if I need. When you hover over the sub view, it usually automatically goes to this eyedropper. It's pretty convenient for doing this. Now the horns, I don't have it showing on this ref image, but it is actually a gradient that kind of match the eyes, so I'll color that last because I'll have to select it all separately. Alright, and then I forgot to line the ears, so I'm gonna make a new layer for that. So it's behind all that, so I don't have to worry about being in the lines. I think I'll do a gold for the piercings. I'll put highlights on those to make them look more like gold. I just kind of picked the middle color so I can add shadows and highlights. So I'm gonna make a folder inside the folder, so bear with me. This is gonna be for the horns. Like that, and that, and that. Then this is my airbrush tool. So I'm gonna pick the darker color I want to use. And then the lighter color. You might even pick maybe even that lighter color. Just kind of messing with the colors to get them where I want. There we go. Alright. So sometimes now is a good time that I like to try to figure out what I want to do color-wise. So I'm gonna try to pick complementary color for the background. And then I like to put just some sort of gradient on top. Overlay, decrease that. I'm gonna flip it because I want that heavier color on the top. Also just gonna select everything and move it around a little bit. So I can have it more centered. Oh, that corner I missed. Overlay. There we go. And then I also like to add like a highlight shape kind of. So this is where having a bajillion different brushes kind of helps with that. I can just find something that I find the pattern of interesting. I even have like snake scale brushes and stuff. Yeah. I have a children's book style brush pack that's got some pretty cool patterning. Where is it? Aha. I really love this crosses pattern. Just these little pluses. I think they look pretty cool. I think I want them a little bigger. So what I'll do is I'm increasing the scaling of the texture it's pulling this from. And also, like, where I get all these brushes, it's Clip Studio itself has a brush store, and there's a lot of free brushes on there. Or Gumroad. Gumroad's another good site to just get a bunch of brushes off of. Some of them are paid, some of them are not. Like, I paid for some of these I didn't. Some of them were free. And then, kind of using that clip layer, I'm going to add a gradient to this, just so it's not flat white. There we go. Back to the character itself. So what I'm going to do next is probably just go ahead and get the eyes done. So I'm going to merge the darker pupils, I'm going to merge the lighter pupils. And the reason that I did these in folders is because I can now do clipping inside of that. So I'm clipping a layer above each pupil so I can color with my airbrush and not worry about hitting the other layers while also containing it to that specific spot, while still also meshing to the bottom image. I know that's a lot and it can be kind of hard to understand. It is one of those things that once you do it a few times and just play with it, then you'll get it. Like, I recommend starting off in any program, just try random tools, see what they do, mess with the settings. You can always just reset your program to default settings if you ever need to. So the eyes, I like to put a glow at the bottom, and I'm gonna make the top a little darker. And then on the pupil, or iris, I'm not good with the eye terms, that part. And then on top of everything is where I'm going to put the highlights, just so when I shade and stuff, it's not going to affect it. There we go. Okay. Now I've got the eyes, all these colors. I'm gonna put all of this into a folder. Just kind of helps simplify my view. And then on top of all this, I'm gonna start doing my shading. So sometimes it helps just to have a plain background so I can figure out where my shadows are without being distracted by all the different colors. So what I'm gonna do is, I like to pick like mid-purple tones for my type of character. This is where you get the color theory, picking which colors you want to be the shadows, which colors you want to be the lights, and how they mix. This is how I'm wanting to do this. So right now I'm not going to clip it because I have that layer hidden. You won't be able to see what I'm shading. So what I might do is just pull this layer up just so I can clip it and see what I'm doing. But not worry about getting outside the lines. So what I'm trying to do is outline the shadows. Sometimes it can be a little easier to do some of the bigger shadows like this first. Like I know the hair is going to cast a pretty big shadow. The horns will have a shadow. The ear is going to cast a shadow. Go ahead and fill those in. And there's plenty of different ways of going about doing the shading and lighting. I recommend watch a bunch of different videos. This is just the way that works for me mentally. It's just kind of how my brain comprehends it. It's the whole outlining. It's almost like I'm drawing around the highlights. So to some, all these lines make no sense until I fill them in. To me, it makes sense. And that's where you just kind of gotta find your own flow, your own way of thinking about it. Also, just want to mention real quick, if you like the background music that's playing, I am listening to White Bat Audio. They have a whole bunch of just copyright, royalty-free background music you can use for stuff. So that's just what I'm listening to as I do this. I also use their audios for my streams a lot. Which I have been trying to get back into is streams, and I do hope to do maybe some streams, almost like art lessons where people ask me questions. I kind of go over things. I do have a degree in art, but I don't have like an educational degree in art. It's just a degree in art, not teaching. So I hope I explained this all. This is just kind of something I enjoy doing. I know ever since I put that paw video up, a lot of people really liked it and really want me to do more. I get a lot of like private messages and stuff. So now that my life is kind of back to some normality, I hope to keep doing these. I do struggle personally a lot with the hair, just because it is such a large shape. I struggle a lot with how to define where to put the shadows. just because realistically hair, the whole thing is both shadows and lights, but I'm trying to define it into like larger chunks. And I would probably find, that usually when I sit down and work on a piece, I do spend more time defining, like, oh, where do I want to put the shadow, where do I put the light? But I'm trying to do this all in just one video for you guys. So there's a lot more fine tuning that would normally go into this. And don't be afraid to take, like, weeks even on a drawing. Like, that's perfectly normal. I do like to occasionally highlight, like, a specific strand as a shadow, just to kind of help give the hair some flow. But normally I would fine tune this hair a lot more. It is the part I struggle more with. The shadows would probably turn out a bit different, but I do also put a shadow on the eyes, because if you think about it, even though the eyes are transparent, they still have shadows and lights affecting them. Well as this eyebrow. Alright, and I'm going to set this to multiply. That's the layer type I like to use for shadows. I'm going to drop this back where it was. And then I'm going to make this visible again. There. You can see the shadows on there, just to kind of show the transition. So this is normal, full opacity, but then I drop it to multiply. And then I decrease it to how I want. Another thing with shadows is normally they're not really hard to find like that, so I could duplicate it. My favorite blur function on this program is filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And that set it pretty strong. And that's how I get kind of that almost like soft edge effect. So, and that pop-up, by the way, was a quick save. So you can see here I have two different shadow layers. I have one that's got the hard edge, one that's got the soft. I like to make the soft edge more pronounced, while the hard edge kind of in the middle. There we go. I like that. That's how I like to do that. And then when it comes to the highlights, I try to sway away from putting a whole bunch of highlights, because unless it's really reflective, like the horns or the jewelry or something, I try not to go too crazy. I'm going to pick probably a different brush than normal. Try to pick something soft. I'm going to use Glow Dodge for this. And it is okay if the highlight kind of goes over the shadow. The hair specifically is going to have a lot different type of highlights on it. Like I said, normally I would probably go way more picky on where I'm putting these, but I play with, like, do I like that there? Do I like that there? Different colors, stuff like that. But for the sake of this video and keeping it timely for you guys, this is kind of an overview. In the future, I hope to make, like, more breakdown videos, like one on eyes, one on ears, one on hair, stuff like that. This is just an overview of, like, okay, this is the general overall process. You can see here I'm mainly just kind of hitting the edges and stuff. And then I can also take this blur brush right here, and I can tone down some areas that may have hit a little too hard. And it's important to have a good balance of hard shadows, like soft shadows, hard highlights, and soft highlights. And another thing I like to do is on the entire image itself. So you can see I'm making more clip layers here that all clip to this main bulk of color. I also like to put my background back. Do kind of like color overlays that match the background a little bit. Actually, I might make this represent kind of like shadow areas, just kind of a general gist. This is going to represent areas that are just in general getting hit by light. You see how I did that? It's almost like stripes. And I can do an overlay on this. Drop it down. It's kind of subtle, but it actually helps a lot. So you can see the difference here and here. Kind of flows better with the background. That's where just different lights and stuff would be interacting. Sometimes I'll even go a step further and just pop another in there. I'm gonna do this. Maybe do that one as a glow. You can try different color burn or linear. It's really fun to play with the different layer lights and how they can interact. And then what I'm also going to do is, this is one of the final things I love to do on eyes specifically. I'm definitely going to have to do a video on eyes because it's my favorite part to draw. Is eyes usually have a glossy highlight on the top. That's what I'm going to do here. I select just loosely the top of the part of the eye. And then I usually make it do an add glow. And I want to bring some of the blue color back in the eyes. As well as I want the horns to kind of have like a glowing almost effect. I'm gonna put some of this blue back in the shadows. Got a lot of different colors going on in the hair. Alright. And then right when you probably think I'm done, there's more I do. So I like to also color the lines themselves. This is yet again where that clip layer is going to be useful. What I like to do is use the airbrush. I drop the clipping layer to about half. And I'll select the darker shade near that area. See? So like this shaded area would do that. If I did put this on 100, it gets really confusing on what's line, what's not. That's why I like to drop it about halfway. I think is a good medium. In some areas you'll decide you just don't want to do that and you'll want to leave it really dark. And then you can also manually just adjust. It's good for areas that are like already cast in shadow. The eyes I usually leave black just because they're going to be the most stark part. Alright. I'm going to decrease the brush size just because I'm getting some of these smaller areas that I don't want to leach over too much. this a bit warmer. There we go. I just like to follow the shadows and lights sometimes. There we go. You can see it's a subtle but also pretty big impact on the drawing. And one of the final things I really love to do, some people say it's pretty characteristic of my style, is I love to do these like outlines. So what I do to do an outline is I duplicate that foundation layer almost, that just block of color that we have, that everything falls onto. I duplicate it, go to my fill tool. I do not refer multiple layers because the only thing I'm actually referring is that gray background right there you see. Then I'm going to select white. I'm going to increase the area scaling. I'm just going to click, click, click. Almost gives kind of like a sticker-like background. And then I like to also duplicate it again, so now I have two of them. Spend a little bit more, and I'm going to blur this layer. And then what I do is I go on the very top of all these layers. And I'm going to take a small fine brush. And then I'm actually going to draw white lines into the drawing. Kind of showing where things are in the foreground versus the background. If it's in the front, it's going to have like a light halo around it. Since it's so zoomed in, it's okay if it's a little messy, and I'm probably a little bit more picky, but yet again, kind of going back to that, just trying to keep this a little bit more timely for y'all. And I also use my discretion. Some things like I'll want to go and do that highlight for, other things I might not. It can also be nice sometimes to put these thin highlights in the eyes. And some of you who are more familiar with my art, you're probably really confused why the eyes look different than usual. It's partly because I put, I kid you not, like 40 to 50 layers of itself into the eyes just because it is my favorite part to do. So this is a very simplified version of what I usually do. And also learning how to do that folder to group layers can be really helpful later on the line. Whenever you do get into just lots and lots of layers, it really helps you keep organized. You can also rename them. I'm really bad about just never reading things, so naming them doesn't help me any. I do color code sometimes. So here's the difference with the highlighted areas and the non. I do sometimes drop the opacity a little bit on it, just so it's not as stark. And then what I'm going to do is I actually keep my logo as a saved file in my favorites, so that way it's easy to just drag and drop like I just did. Size it to how I want. Throw it in the corner. Then I can change the color. Flip over it. Try not to make it too obnoxious, but also visible. And then just for my own protection, kind of like a watermark, I usually duplicate it, throw it very transparent and faint. I mean, it's faint enough that, like, if you're looking for it, you can see it. But it's also not so blatantly obvious, so if someone tries to steal my artwork, like, they might not realize it's even there. Alright. Save, and there we go. So yeah, this is just a basic overview of how I draw heads. Obviously, there's a lot more that could go into it, and we're factoring in the species, the different colors, if you're designing the character for the first time, or if this is a character you've known for quite a while. This is kind of a recent redesign. I'm also just now realizing I forgot to put the freckles, but that's fine. That's something I can always go in and put in later. But as for this video, just definitely let me know below. Like, comment below, let me know if you enjoyed this, what specific things you would like to see. Let me know if this video made sense, if there's anything for my future videos you'd like to see me change. I'd love to get some feedback, especially just not get back into this. I never really haven't been deep into videos prior to this anyways. Any input is going to be really useful and helpful. As well as just let me know if you enjoyed this. If this is the type of stuff you'd love to see, I'll definitely try to keep making more videos. My current goal is to try to record once a week and then edit and upload at least once a week, maybe every other week. Where I work, it is a little chaotic schedule-wise time to time, depending on staffing. But yeah, definitely let me know what you think, and I'd love and hope to hear back from y'all. Y'all have a wonderful day. Bye.